Magic is a complicated game. Some people liken it to poker and chess played simultaneously, and this is to some degree true. There are cards, like poker, and once played, some of those cards functionally become pieces, like chess. Using a combination of said cards and pieces, the eventual goal is to reduce the life total of an opponent to 0. Simple? Sure. So far. The complexity comes from the vast array of cards at one's disposal. Imagine playing poker and chess at the same time again. Now imagine that you draw 3 of a kind and delete your opponent's rook. They, in response, draw a pair of 4s and stop this action. Back to you and you are graced with a full house, obliterating all of their pawns. Now you're starting to get it. With a game this robust, there's always going to be a competitive scene. After all, what's the point of playing a game if not to prove that you're the best? Dissenters of this opinion are encouraged to return to the kitchen table and cast Doomblade at sorcery speed. Born of this desire to prove one's dominance, the first competitive Magic tournament was played at Gen Con in 1994. It was a constructed tournament with 512 participants, and the winners received such paltry prizes as some booster packs, a deck of Magic-themed playing cards, and a t-shirt. As much as I am currently dismissive of the prizes presented here, they're also quite likely to be highly valuable collector's items. Because there's one thing that Magic the Gathering proves, is that nerds will spend obscene amounts of money on anything related to their nerdy fixations. Flash forward a couple of years to 1996 when the first Pro Tour was held. Instead of some cardboard and a t-shirt, the prize pool for this event was a cool 30 grand, marrying the desire for dominance with the allure of significant amounts of cash. This 5-figure prize pool, however, would pale in comparison to future prize pools, as the current cast of premier card slingers would compete for a prize pool of a literal $1 million. But the topic of today's competitive scene is a tale for another time. Our story takes place in Portland, circa 2015. Saturday, May 2nd of that year, our protagonist sets forth on his journey in the early hours of the morning. Feeling a bit under the weather, he acquired a remedy to what ails him before setting off on his journey for victory. Spoilers, this aforementioned remedy is a Ziploc bag filled with psychedelic mushrooms. As this protagonist, Christopher Morris Lent, sets out to test his might, he's accosted with a drudgery often associated with waking up in the early hours of the morning. His solution? Start shrooming. Forget something, CMO? Said Jamal, the strip club DJ. Nope, I said, grabbing some shrooms. They tasted disgusting. Can I have some coffee? I asked Brendan, the cosplay photographer. No. We were somewhere around Lacey when the drugs started to take hold. This was not an atypical course of action for Mr. Morrisland. As in the article he wrote about his experience, he describes how in the past, he had used magic mushrooms to manifest a victory for his ostensible sports team of choice, the Seattle Seahawks. But this is a story about Magic the Gathering, not sports ball, so I'll leave the specifics of said manifestation to your imagination. Suffice to say that Mr. Morris Lent was no stranger to psychedelics, and as such, he had consumed a fair quantity at this early point in the tournament. Reality bent to his whims as he prepared for the grueling battle that was before him. I looked down at my hand. The flesh darkened and shriveled against the bright day outside. Was I to be slain and lobotomized and reanimated into a dread zombie to do the bidding of vile necromancy? Or was this the first sign of my transcendence into a higher realm, the tinder that would ignite my planeswalker spark? The first rounds of any Magic tournament are largely there to separate the wheat from the chaff, to distill those who are worthy from those who are not. And as such, they are typically uneventful as the more skilled players rise to the top and the less skilled players lose and drop from the tournament. That being said, Mr. Morris Lent does have one of these early matches recorded for posterity. The 2 decks vying for supremacy are Sultai Reanimator and Devotion to Red, with our protagonist playing the former. To put it succinctly, Reanimator decks leverage their life total in the early game and attempt to stabilize late game by cheating threats from their graveyard back onto the battlefield. Devotion to Red is a larger cousin of the Red Deck Wins archetype. Red Deck Wins focuses on playing efficiently and bursting down the opponent as quickly as possible with a relative disregard for the long game. Devotion skews from this paradigm by bolstering the late game with slightly larger threats and thereby getting a bit more longevity. That being said, the story of this match is largely one of bursting versus stabilizing. Game 1 follows this formula to a T, with the Devotion deck spewing forth quite a large amount of damage in the early game before the tides are turned and Mr. Morris Lent stabilizes and cracks back for lethal. There is a minor instance of negligence on the part of the red player, as towards the end of the game he misreads one of his cards and puts too many creatures onto the battlefield.
Yeah, and there is a pause for Judge here. There was a Judge play FC. Yeah, he didn't actually have quad red to make all of those creatures.
Yeah, Nykthos isn't providing any colored mana in this spot, so and every card that Travis played last turn was a red mana symbol card, so that deployment there from Travis was not lethal.
So the judge is going to make a ruling on it in the situation. This is interesting. So what happens, in this situation? First, the judge will determine can they rewind it. Now, Chris has already drawn a card, played a land, so it's up to the judge's discretion if they want to go all the way back.
This requires judge intervention and results in the game state being turned back slightly. It matters not, as our protagonist is a turn away from lethal and takes game 1. In game 2, the dichotomy remains the same. However, this time CML is unable to stabilize and gets got by the slightly swole variant of red deck wins.
Even Flame Lake Phoenix from Travis, even if he misses the land, but he doesn't. Fnatic, that deals 4, Chris is at 2.
Yeah, this attack just comes
you can
across
just
the
swing.
lethal. Yep.
Game 3. Redden it up.
Nice.
All right, I liked that. Fnatic was really good there.
Game 3 is upon us and the two shuffle up and play. Mr. Morris Lent survives the early onslaught by just a hair, reducing his life total to just a singular point.
I mean, that's a stay of execution. Now Chris gets a big opportunity on the way back here.
He's missed. He did the right play, except he missed forgot he had a Flame Lake Phoenix in the yard.
Yeah.
And that could have come back and done it. And it may cost him the game.
As he begins to stabilize, his opponent has one final opportunity to prevail. However, the correct line of play is not clear to him, and he misses lethal.
Here, he's going to have more flexibility to make some aggressive attacks the next turn if he wants to. Gain a lot of life here.
8 life there. Yeah, he goes up, gains 7, goes to 8. So both players at 8. This is Travis's last chance to win, and I don't know if he has 8 damage anymore.
This is all the opportunity that our intrepid psychedelic adventurer needs, and Mr. Morris Lent cracks back for the game-winning swing.
Draw for the turn is another land, so that'll be it. Chris Morris Lent takes game 3, and he is your winner over Travis O'Dell.
Yeah, quite the sweat there. Travis had it. I mean, it involves something in the graveyard, and that stuff gets missed all the time.
After this match, our intrepid hero continues to play the rest of the matches throughout day 1 of the tournament, ending with a quite impressive 8-1 record. Voices, either in his imagination or in reality, spoke confidently of Mr. Morris Lent's prospects. CML's gonna win the tournament, said someone, or were the voices in my head singing Renaissance counterpoint. What's your record, CML? I'm 8-1. You're 8-1? Am I? I said, you are. Are you asking me or telling me? Telling? Said Aaron. Regardless of the legitimacy of the voices bolstering his confidence, our hero left the tournament and swapped his mushroom trip for a whiskey buzz, allowing him to get a good night's sleep and play the rest of the tournament with a clear head. As day 2 dawns, Mr. Morris Lent gets his head in the game by imbibing more magic mushrooms. Between rounds, he waxes philosophically about the nature of drugs in Magic the Gathering. No alcoholic beverages, said Jamal, reading the sign outside the tournament hall. Read that, CML? It says, no alcoholic beverages. But it doesn't say no drugs, I said. If it did, said Jamal, what would they do with all the cats on Adderall? It was true. Just as any company in Seattle that drug tested would immediately have to fire half its employees. Adderall use at Magic tournaments is as widespread as greenies were in 20th century baseball. Our hero was in a very good spot at this point. His record allowed him to go into some of the more preliminary matches of the tournament on day 2 with a more blasé attitude about victory. But if you concede to me, both of us will make it. I'll concede if someone else can confirm it, I said. You'd be the most awesome guy ever, he answered. I was the most awesome guy ever. He really knew how to flatter someone on shrooms. That, and he was a genuinely nice guy. The match started and I got off to a big lead in game 1. Then I revealed a card that shouldn't have been in my starting lineup, but on the bench, if you will. Oops, I said blithely. I forfeited the game. A friend of mine came by. You're mathematically locked for top 8, even if you lose. Are you going to concede now? Said my foe. I might later, I said. Regardless of concessions and draws, CML now found himself in the top 8 and began his harrowing ascent to the final spot. But before that, he still had to conquer the quarterfinals and the semifinals. His opponent in the quarterfinals was one he had played before and was nervous about the prospect of facing again. On to the quarterfinals. Was I having a flashback? Or was this really the guy I'd played in round 13? I didn't want to. He was kinda good.
It's Chris Morris-Lent. With Corso Crewfix in play, Den Protector in the graveyard, Death Mist Raptor as the top card. So Steven's going to unmorph Den Protector, get back his 3-2. That's going to be Avatar of the Resolute. That's a 4-card, a 4 of in his deck, and which actually gets bigger thanks to the 1/1 counter on Den Protector. So a pretty sweet turn here for Steven. We'll send Chris down to 14.
The story of this game is one of either fortune or misfortune, depending on your perspective. CML's opponent flooded out, a magic colloquialism for drawing too many lands and not enough spells. Poor variance, if you will. But what is poor variance for one is good variance for another, and this bout of bad luck by his opponent caused our protagonist to take this quarterfinals match 2-0.
Hand of Forest, Fetchland, Nykthos. More lands that he can reasonably use. Sidisi will be drawn for Chris. Swings with Sidisi. Courser not even going to join, he's just playing this very carefully. And then he'll play Hornet Queen. Looks like that was the card he searched for.
Sure.
Looks great. Making 4 insects.
A lot of totally fine cards for Chris to tutor for in that spot.
And we'll go back to Gardner. Last draw, that's not going to help. Is another land. So, Chris Morris-Lent 2-0. He is your victor over Steven Gardner.
Some fun there from Steve.
Now, onto the semifinals. The antagonist in this match was playing Blue-Green Devotion, a deck primarily focused on some early game aggression combined with a large influx of buffed creature tokens generated in the mid-game.
Chris has done a great job of not providing a quality target ever for the Silumgar Sorcerer in next hand.
I think Nick can say, all right, I'll take this hit, end of turn, play the Silumgar Sorcerer, untap Master Waves, really puts you to test to have a removal spell.
Yeah, so Chris back up to 10 off the lifelink. Draw here from Nick. It is an untapped land. It's land 5. It's going to be a good one. Going to play Master Waves, Devotion of 3.
There's a bit of back and forth as the aggressive Devotion player takes Mr. Morris-Lent's life total relatively low.
And here's me the swing. And yeah, so more synergy in case you're wondering. Yes, Frostwalker also an elemental. Now a 5 dude's going to eat the Seder Wayfinder. Not trade with it. It'll swing across. Chris will gain a life there, but takes 2, goes down to 9.
Our protagonist stabilizes and the two dirtle for a bit before the game culminates in an alpha swing by the Devotion player.
Nick, he's going to swing everything. He knows he's going to lose a lot for it. He's going to lose everything. I don't think it's lethal. I don't think he can do this. It was close, but it's not there.
This move is in vain, however, and our hero wins on the crackback. CML loses game 2. After stabilizing a bit in the mid-game, he eventually falls as he is unable to answer the Devotion player.
Elemental 2/4. Shrinking Thassa doesn't do anything. If he tries to kill the Silumgar Sorcerer, Nick still has 5 Devotion. There's no way for Bob to get him out of that spot.
All right, so Nick Peter now evens it up at 1 game apiece in what's been some of the more complicated games of Standard I've seen in a long time.
It is now game 3, and Mr. Morris-Lent is scaling nicely. His opponent is not dealing damage early to apply the proper amount of pressure. Before long, CML is gaining enough life to make the swings of the Devotion player largely irrelevant.
Let's see what he wants to do. Shore Crasher in front of the 2/1. Now, looks like I should take 2 off Corsair. That's some free damage, but maybe one that he has to do.
Yep. I think he needs to keep Chris honest to at least fire off the Crux of Fate here.
Yeah, if he blocks the Sorcerer, maybe Chris doesn't Crux of Fate.
Maybe just cast some random creatures or so forth.
Yeah. Nick down to 2, Chris gains the 4 life, and now Crux of Fate sweeps up everything but the Thassa.
Now, I think there's still hope here with Collected Company. Nick is not necessarily out of this game.
Yeah, he'll have to use it defensively.
The game ends in a concession, and we move on to the finals.
And it's not going to work, so there you have it. Chris Morris-Lent takes game 3 out in a slugfest over Nick Peternell and moves on to the final.
I could summarize the finals, but I will instead bow out and let the hero of our story describe his own victory. I stared at the trippy art in my beautiful deck and felt destiny course through me with the might of a million memories. I knew I would win the tournament. I also knew I'd gotten this feeling dozens of times before. and I'd invariably lost. At some point, with all the dull brutality of probability, he stumbled game 1, and I was one with my deck. I was the Whip of Erebos that resurrected the Hornet Queen. I was the Satyr Wayfinder that blazed a fratty trail through the Virgin Lands. I was the Temple of Melody that sucked dry the forest of impurity and affliction. I indulged myself with these thoughts, so far ahead in game 2. So close to victory that I thought 2 of all the ways I could lose, before realizing there weren't any. Our story ends with our hero regretting his decision to split the prize pool, claiming it to be a deviation from his villain persona. But who is to say what the right decision would be? But what is the moral of this story? Is there even one to be found in this tale? What wisdom can be gleaned from a nerd winning a little over $2,000 by putting cardboard on a table? Ostensibly, the lesson, as it is in all tales of magic, is this. Winning at Magic the Gathering is very fun. Probably more so when you're high as a kite.